Welcome, everyone, to another edition of The Travel Show with your host, Ted Blank of Ted Blank Luxury Travel and Adventure. And as we do every Thursday, we chatted up about all your favorite travel topics. And today is no exception, except I'm not quite sure what we're going to talk about. I don't quite understand this concept. So I'm anxious for you to explain it. How have you been?
What a perfect topic for a radio show.
No kidding. How have you been?
I've been doing really well, thank you.
So, Ted, I know what cruising is, and I know what going on an expedition is, but I've never heard of expedition cruising.
Yeah, so expedition cruising is actually the fastest growing segment of the cruise industry.
Look at you on the cutting edge.
Yes. And so if you kind of look at the two words, expedition and cruising, well, cruising is pretty simple. It's a cruise. So it's on a ship that floats and goes from place to place. But that's about all it really has in common with, a Caribbean cruise or even maybe an Alaskan cruise like we normally think about cruising. Expedition cruising is conducted on very small ships. They're often 75 to 250 passengers, and they're going to tend to go to places that big cruise ships don't go and mass market tourists don't go to. And so that's kind of where the expedition piece comes into it. And a good metaphor for what an expedition cruise is it's almost like a safari at sea.
Oh.
And so you are going on an expedition cruise. People go on expedition cruises because they want to see sort of the wonders of the world, the natural landscapes, the wildlife, and the people who live in kind of remote destinations, remote places, and kind of get acquainted with them. So it's kind of a safari at sea on a very, very small ship that's going to take you to amazing places that very, very few people have ever been. And I think sometimes we maybe have heard of expedition cruises or even cruises to places like Antarctica before, and we tend to think of these sort of rusty old icebreakers that were piled into bunks into the basement with the crew, and that's how it is. And it's not like that at all. Expedition cruise ships are very modern. They're very much cutting edge technology in all aspects of it. Many of them are actually powered by liquid natural gas, so they don't emit anything into the atmosphere, so very environmentally sustainable and very nice, very luxurious. You're not trading away your creature comforts even though you're going to these exotic destinations.
When you say that this is something that is a smaller cruise line, are these places that we would not be able to go to on a large cruise ship because they're too big? Or is it some place that we just wouldn't go to because it's not offered?
It's really both, but it's primarily because these are places where large cruise ships either aren't permitted, like Antarctica. Large cruise ships are just not permitted to land passengers in Antarctica, or they're places that are so small that the large cruise ships can't go there. And if you look at a brochure from an expedition cruise line company, they'll have an itinerary in there, they'll have a little bit of a map, but you're not necessarily pulling into a port, tying up the ship, getting off, and walking around town looking at churches and palaces and souvenir shops. In many cases, the ship might not even dock. It might anchor, and you get off on little boats called Zodiacs that take you, for example, up a river to look for wildlife, or onto the shore of Antarctica where you can get off and see the penguins. It's not a port call kind of in the traditional sense like on a regular cruise. They have an itinerary, but it's not necessarily going to a lot of cities in most cases.
So why is this so fast growing, as you said?
I think because a lot of people have discovered that, if you've been to Europe once or twice, a lot of people get museumed out. They get churched out. They're tired of seeing inanimate objects, and they really want to experience the world in an uncrowded, untouristed way. And so expedition cruises are the perfect match for that. They take you to those uncrowded, untouristed places where, you're probably going to be the only ship in that area at all. You may be the first ship to ever have gone there. And so you're seeing things and going places that other people can't go. and seeing that wildlife and that natural beauty and those meeting the people that other people just can't do.
So is it places that are not very populated?
Well, a lot of them are. Places where expedition cruises, they kind of got their start going to Antarctica.
Okay.
That was kind of the first place. So nobody lives in Antarctica except the penguins. So no people in Antarctica. The North Pole and the polar regions up there, Greenland, Iceland, the northern part of Norway is another area where expedition cruising has become popular. The Galapagos Islands, which, more birds than people. Really nobody lives there. South Pacific, Caribbean, but you're not going to be going to St. Thomas and tying up at the big shopping center with the big cruise ships. You're probably going to be going to different islands and different places and looking for different things.
So even though you're probably going to some of the same places you may have been before, it's a completely different experience.
It's a completely different experience, and you're not going to be going to those top 10 ports. If you make a list of the top 10 ports in the Caribbean that, attract cruise ship traffic,
it's not going to be any of
they
them.
might start there because it has a big airport and it's
Sure.
easy to get to, but as soon as you leave that port, you're going to be off into a whole different world. So it really is, it can be done kind of anywhere. I mean, Alaska is another place where there are some ports that the big cruise ships go to, and that's a very interesting way to see Alaska. These ships are going to go places where the big cruise ships don't. Towns that almost have no name. And, you might anchor in a bay, get on the Zodiacs, and start driving around looking for whales. And when you find them, everybody stops and watches the whales. So it's just a different experience and a different way of traveling.
So who is this cruise for?
Well, it's interesting because I think, as I describe expedition cruises, you might think they're for the kind of person who in another life would be climbing Mount Everest or something like that.
Yes, this is what I'm thinking.
And they're really not.
Okay.
Really, they're for anyone.
Okay.
Primarily adults, because they're going to tend to be a little longer. They might be 10 to 14 to 21 day cruises. And, if you can get from the dock onto a boat, here on the Mississippi River, you're probably in good enough physical shape to take advantage of an expedition. So you can get off the ship, get on the Zodiacs, go ashore, and, you might not walk too far from where the ship docks you off. And that's great. The cruise will have naturalists and experts who go with you, and some of them will stay with you right by where you get off, so you don't have to worry about climbing over rocks or things like that. But if you want to go for longer hikes, that's also possible too. So really a broad spectrum of people. I would say the main criteria is you have to be intellectually curious about the world. And when I talk to people who have gone on these expedition cruise ships, without fail, they will come back with almost a life-changing story that they experienced. They got up in the morning and the ship had literally pulled up on the ice in Greenland. And they looked out and there was a family of polar bears frolicking right there. I mean, you can't see that.
No.
Or, you're in the Caribbean going up like one of the mangrove forests, and all of a sudden you see freshwater alligators playing around. Or you wake up and you see the incredible sunset or the sunrise over Antarctica where there's no one around. Mm-hmm. Or you go to the Galapagos and you see those birds that don't exist anywhere else, and you kind of understand why was Darwin so fascinated by this? Why did he spend his time there? And so people come back with these stories that are almost sort of spiritual. Mm-hmm. And really, I think what we think travel should be, maybe at its highest level, is this is it. But it's also relaxing. It's not like you are climbing Mount Everest. Each night you're going back to your cabin. Your hotel, your floating hotel is moving with you. Excellent food, excellent service. They have hot tubs, infinity pools, heated pools. I mean, everything you need, spas to really enjoy. And they take a lot of the rough edges out of expeditions. So, for example, some of the cruise lines provide you with that waterproof parka, the waterproof boots. So when you get there, you don't have to pack that. They have it for you there. You wear it, and you leave it there for the next person. But imagine if you had to take waterproof boots and a big waterproof parka down to Antarctica. You'd have one suitcase for the boots. So they take care of a lot of those rough edges that make it a very, very simple, seamless experience in many, many ways.
So Antarctica, how would we get there?
So to get to Antarctica, normally you would fly to the far southern tip of South America. So you'd fly to Argentina or Chile. And a lot of the expedition cruise lines will actually start their programs in Santiago or Buenos Aires, the capitals. And they'll have a charter flight that will fly you down to the tip of the continent where the ships embark. And then you'll cruise to Antarctica. And if you look at a map of these cruises, they're just a big blob. It'll say days 2 through 10 Antarctica. And the ship's captains, who have been doing this for many, many years, they will consult with the naturalists on board, and they will take you to the best places to see the penguins and the whales and the icebergs and all those things that you really, really want to see. So no two Antarctic cruises are ever the same. Then you'll turn around and you'll go back to the end of South America.
And I would assume that after that cruise or before, you can put together some packages for people to explore.
Yeah, sometimes people do want to explore. Chile, very famous for its wine, so you can enjoy wine. Buenos Aires is a beautiful, beautiful city, so certainly you could do that. But the highlight will be that cruise, absolutely.
And where are some of the other places that we can go on these expedition cruises?
Yeah, so besides the polar regions, probably, Antarctica, probably the most popular, North Pole area, really becoming popular, Greenland, Iceland, the northern coast of Norway. There's a group of islands up there called Svalbard, where there are more polar bears than people. And the capital city has kind of a funny name. It's called Longyearbyen. And if you think about the words in that, they're Norwegian, but Longyear was named because the people who live there said it's a really long year when you have to spend a year up here in Longyearbyen, because it's pretty darn cold. So that has really become kind of maybe the second most popular destination for expedition cruises. But then you have the Galapagos, the South Pacific, the Caribbean, Alaska, Southeast Asia, the islands in the Indian Ocean, like the Seychelles, the Maldives, Madagascar, really almost anywhere. And even expedition cruises will sometimes head up the Amazon River, do South America and head up into the Amazon River. So almost anywhere there's water, you can do an expedition cruise.
And what exactly do these ships look like?
They vary quite a bit. Some of them look sort of like a traditional icebreaker or something like that. They look kind of big and massive, and you can almost feel how thick the hull is. Other ones look more like yachts, and they're very sleek and very elegant. So they can really be very, very different. But like I said, they're going to carry between 70, 80 people and 250 to 300 people. So quite small. If you were in port and you saw it next to the big cruise ship, you would realize how small these are. But that doesn't mean that they're not built to handle rough weather or waves or anything like that. The stabilizers and things are very, very advanced. And so you have a very comfortable ride, even though it's a very small ship.
And as you said before, a lot of times the smaller the ship gets, the higher quality of service we sometimes get.
The service is always going to be top-notch. The staff, this is a place where the staff can't hide. So if they aren't pulling their weight, if they aren't doing a good job, they're not going to last very long on a ship like this. And so they tend to have very long-serving staff who do a really, really good job. They put a lot of effort and investment into those onboard naturalists. They're very specialized in the areas you're going to be going to. And if a ship is going to the polar region in the summer and Antarctica in the winter, they're going to have different naturalists on board. So those experts, and it could be a cultural anthropologist, if you're going to a more place where it's a little bit more about culture than it is about wildlife, they're going to be super, super expert. And they really, on a small ship, they're going to have dinner with you. And you can talk to them about their work and really get to know them. So it's a very intimate experience from that perspective.
So what are some sample cruises that you wanted to tell us about?
Yes, I just kind of pulled out two that I thought were interesting and kind of showed the diversity of expedition cruising. And they are both from a cruise line called Ponant Cruises. And Ponant is a French-owned expedition cruise line. They have 12 ships that go all over the world. And so the first one is actually in the north. And so you fly into Reykjavik, Iceland, and it's 12 days long, and you spend your time kind of exploring the coast of Iceland. Then you make a left turn and head over to Greenland and kind of make your way up to the coast of Greenland. And you'll stop from time to time in really beautiful areas, natural beauty, places where there's wildlife, and places where you can meet the Inuit who live in Greenland, who are actually very close relatives of the Alaskan, the people we call Eskimos. So they're kind of the same ethnicity. And then you'll head over to that place where all the polar bears are, called Svalbard in Norway. And you'll end there. And the ship that they use is probably the most impressive expedition ship in the world. It's called the Commandant Charcot. It's named after a French polar explorer. And it is a full-blown icebreaker. This ship has actually broken the ice and sailed all the way up to the North Pole.
Because it has to,
Because
right?
it has to. And in this situation, you may break some ice and, explore some areas that a regular ship couldn't get to. But it also has a heated infinity pool. It has a spa. It has Michelin star restaurants on board. I mean, it's a phenomenal ship. And so that was kind of the first itinerary that I picked. The second one, this one you can bring your bathing suit along for. It's a little warmer. And it's in the Caribbean. And it actually sails round trip out of Belize City in Belize. And so Belize is a relatively popular place for people to go, but it's really hard to get around. There are no roads. And the only way to get between the different islands there is to fly on the little, 6 or 8 seater airplanes. So this is a 7-day cruise that starts and ends in Belize City, and you're going to basically go to a lot of the very small little islands and keys off the coast. So if you want to scuba dive, great opportunity to scuba dive. If you're into wildlife, so many unique opportunities. You can go exploring the mangrove swamps, birds, and interesting fish. And this ship is another kind of a fun ship. It's called the Dumont d'Urville. It's named after another French explorer. So if you want to go on Ponant, you'll have to brush up on French explorers. But it has a really unique feature called the Blue Eye. And the Blue Eye is a lounge that's below the water level. And it's like a glass-bottom boat.
What?
And so it has a window, and when the ship is anchored in a harbor, you can go down there, and you can look around, and you can see the fish swimming by. And in the polar regions, you can actually sometimes see whales swimming by. So it's a really, really cool thing. You could...
That is so
isn't
cool.
that such a clever little idea? And especially in those crystal clear Caribbean waters off Belize, you could sit down there all day and watch the fish go by. And of course, you'll also have a chance to visit some of the Mayan ruins, meet the Mayan people, and learn how they live their lives today as well. So, very different than exploring the North Pole. There aren't going to be polar bears. There's not going to be any ice except in your cocktail, but also an expedition. And so this one takes place in the winter, December, January, February. The polar season, the North Pole season, is May, June, July, August, and early September.
Fascinating. I knew nothing about any of this.
Yeah, it like I said, it's the fastest growing segment of cruising, but I think if you asked a normal person on the street, they wouldn't even know that this was possible. And I think, if you've maybe been to Europe once or twice, want to go do something really, really different and enjoy the convenience and the luxury of a cruise, this is a great way to combine the two together and really get away from the world and see it as God intended you to see the world.
Very cool. Ted, thank you so much. If people want to learn more and get a hold of you, how could they do that, please?
Yeah, the best way to get a hold of me is to give me a call at 651-964-8245, or you can visit my website at tedblanktravel.com. You can sign up for my biweekly newsletter there, or you can request an appointment to meet me, and would love to chat with you about expedition cruises in the North Pole, the Caribbean, the South Pole, wherever you want to go.
Love it. Great to see you. Thank you so much. Ted Blank is the host of the travel show, and Ted Blank is with Ted Blank Luxury Travel and Adventure.